Every night after I fell asleep, my wife slipped into the living room. She said she needed quiet time to think, to breathe, to be alone. But I've been married to her for 32 years, and I know the sound of her footsteps. Last week I heard 2 sets of them. My name is Elliot Carter. I'm 58 years old, a retired aerospace engineer, living in a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon. After 35 years of deadlines, mostly in travel, I thought retirement would mean peace, long breakfasts, long walks, soft evenings with my wife Mara. Instead, what I found was silence. Heavy, unnatural silence. Mara and I have been together since college. She's a piano teacher, still graceful and composed with that same steady calm that once drew me to her. But lately the calm feels cold. We eat in the same kitchen, sit on the same couch, yet she feels miles away. I've noticed her smile no longer reaches her eyes. It started small. She began staying up later than usual, saying she needed quiet time. I thought nothing of it at first. Everyone needs a little solitude, I told myself. She'd sit in the living room, with the lights dimmed, her favorite record playing Debussy, sometimes Chopin. But a few weeks ago, I woke up in the middle of the night and heard her voice. At first, I thought she was on the phone. Her tone was soft, intimate, like she was confiding in someone. I lay there listening, waiting for the conversation to end. But it didn't. I heard pauses, long silences, followed by her answering in a whisper, as if replying to someone in the same room. The air in our bedroom felt colder. The next morning over breakfast, I asked casually who she'd been talking to last night. She looked puzzled, then smiled, that polite, distant smile. "You must have dreamed it, Elliot. I was just playing piano. It helps me think." Her voice was smooth, practiced. I wanted to believe her, but I've always trusted logic more than words. And logic told me something didn't fit. That night, I stayed up a little longer after she went downstairs. I listened carefully. The same sounds returned: her soft steps, the faint scrape of a chair, the low murmur of her voice. I crept halfway down the stairs, heart pounding, and peered into the living room. The lamp was on, casting a pale glow across the room. Mara sat on the couch, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She was speaking quietly to someone, but I couldn't see who. The other side of the room was in shadow. Then, for a moment, she turned her head slightly, as if listening. A faint smile crossed her face, and she nodded. I strained to hear, but all I caught were fragments. "I missed you." "Yes, I know. He's asleep." My chest tightened. I thought absurdly that maybe she was video calling someone. But the glow of her phone screen wasn't there. There was nothing in her hands, no device on the table. Just her voice, her face softened by the kind of tenderness I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I backed away quietly, trying not to make a sound. The stairs creaked under my weight, and I froze. For a second, I thought she'd seen me, but she didn't move. She just kept talking. When I returned to bed, I couldn't sleep. Every possibility ran through my mind: an affair, a breakdown, something worse. Logic, the tool I'd trusted all my life, couldn't explain the feeling gnawing at me. The next day, she acted perfectly normal. She made breakfast, asked about the weather, even laughed at one of my old jokes. I wanted to ask again, but something in her calmness warned me not to. It felt rehearsed, like a mask. That afternoon, while she was out teaching piano lessons, I walked into the living room. Everything looked ordinary: the couch, the shelves, the framed photos of our family trips. Yet something felt off, as if the room itself held its breath. I looked at the coffee table. The dust layer had a faint circle, like something heavy had been placed there and removed. I scanned the room slowly. On the far shelf sat her metronome, an old wooden one with brass edges. It was ticking softly, even though no one had been in the room. She never left it running. I stopped it and stood there listening. The silence that followed was almost too thick. That night, I told myself I wouldn't get involved again. People change. Maybe she was meditating, maybe just talking to herself. But as I turned off the lights, I couldn't ignore the unease crawling under my skin. Around midnight, the faint creak of the bedroom door broke the stillness. I kept my eyes closed. Her footsteps were soft, deliberate. Then came another sound, the whisper of slippers brushing the hallway rug, the faint click of the living room light. I waited for the piano keys to play, but instead I heard a man's low murmur. I sat up, my pulse hammering. I told myself it had to be the TV. But when I reached the landing, there was no flicker of light from the screen. No dialogue, only Mara's voice again trembling softly. "Please, don't say that. Not tonight." I stepped down another stair, then another. My reflection in the window glass caught my attention. Pale, drawn eyes wide. I stared at myself, half hoping I was imagining all of this. That's when I heard something that made every hair on my body stand. A man's voice. Clear, low, and calm. It wasn't coming from any speaker, and it wasn't a recording. It came from the same spot where Mara sat, and the voice, God help me, sounded like mine. I froze, gripping the railing. For a moment I thought maybe I'd fallen asleep, standing up, dreaming with my eyes open. But then I heard her reply again, soft and steady. "You're not supposed to be here anymore." The chair scraped against the floor. I felt an irrational fear, like if I moved something terrible would notice me. I backed away slowly, step by step, until I reached the bedroom. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling. When Mara came back to bed just before sunrise, I pretended to be asleep. She slipped under the covers, smelling faintly of cold air and candle wax. My heart was still racing. Later that morning over coffee, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. "You should get some rest today," she said. "You look tired." Tired wasn't the word. I felt hollow. Something inside our home had shifted, something I couldn't name. After she left for her lessons, I sat in the living room again, studying the space. The shadows, the corners, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the distance. I told myself I needed proof. I'd spent a lifetime solving mechanical problems. This couldn't be any different. So I made a decision. If she was hiding something, or someone, I needed to see it with my own eyes. That evening, I went online and began searching for small, discreet home cameras, ones that could be accessed remotely. I told myself it was for home security. But deep down, I knew I wasn't protecting the house. I was protecting the truth. When she came home, I closed the laptop quickly. "Everything okay?" she asked, hanging up her coat. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just reading about home safety systems, thinking we might need an upgrade." She nodded absently, as if the topic didn't interest her. Then she kissed my cheek lightly and walked past. I watched her disappear into the hallway, her figure framed by the warm glow of the lamp. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. The same routine unfolded: her footsteps, the quiet click of the door, the faint hum of the record player downstairs. I turned on the nightstand light and opened a blank page in my notebook. My handwriting shook slightly as I wrote, "If she's hiding something. I need to know the truth, not because I don't trust her, but because I can't live in the dark." When I looked up, my reflection stared back from the darkened window, pale and uncertain. I whispered to it quietly, as if asking permission. "I just need to know who she's talking to." The morning light came slow through the blinds, pale and gray. The kind of light that makes you feel like the world hasn't fully woken up. Mara was already downstairs, humming softly, her voice carrying through the kitchen like a tune from a dream. When I joined her, she looked up from her cup of coffee and smiled the way people do when they're pretending not to notice something. You slept late, she said. I didn't sleep much at all, I answered, sitting across from her. You were up again last night. She didn't even blink. I told you, Elliot. I needed quiet. My mind was racing. You've been needing quiet a lot lately. She stirred her coffee, the spoon clinking against the porcelain. Maybe you should try it too. It might help you stop imagining things. The words hit like a small slap, soft but real. She looked right at me when she said it, and for the first time in years, I felt like she was seeing through me rather than looking at me. I didn't argue. I just nodded, took a sip of the bitter coffee, and let the silence stretch between us. Later that morning, while she was teaching piano to one of her students, I stood outside the music room and listened. Normally, her lessons were lively, laughter, small talk mistakes followed by gentle corrections. But now, her tone was flat, and between the notes, I could hear her whispering. At first, I thought she was talking to the student, but when I peeked in, the girl's hands were still on the keys, and her eyes were wide confused. Mara stood behind her, whispering to someone who wasn't there. When I stepped into the room, she turned sharply, eyes wide for half a second before softening. Oh, Elliot, you startled me. Who were you talking to? She smiled faintly. To myself, apparently. Haven't you ever done that? Her student giggled nervously. I forced a smile and left the room, but my chest felt tight. The sound of her whisper followed me down the hall. That night, I lay awake listening again. The wind brushed against the windows, the trees creaked outside, and somewhere below the floorboards groaned under careful footsteps. I glanced at the clock, 12:11. Mara's side of the bed was empty. I got up quietly, moving like a man in someone else's house. From the top of the stairs, I saw a faint glow flickering from the living room. The light came from a single lamp, low and warm. I crept down 2 steps and stopped. Her voice floated up, soft, rhythmic, the way you speak when comforting a child. You know he's starting to notice, she said. A pause. Then another voice, a whisper deep and low. I couldn't make out the words, but it was enough to chill my blood. I took another step. The floor creaked beneath me, and the sound cut through the silence like a knife. The lamp went out. My heart pounded. I waited for her to come out, but she didn't. The darkness sat heavy and complete. After a long moment, I went back to bed. She returned an hour later, sliding under the covers without a word. The next morning, I found 2 cups on the coffee table in the living room. One was hers, floral pattern chipped at the rim. The other was plain white one I hadn't seen in years. Steam still lingered faintly above it. I picked it up, touched the handle. Warm. When Mara came in, she froze for a fraction of a second before smiling. I made tea. I must have left it there. 2 cups, she tilted her head. You came down, didn't you? Maybe you forgot. I didn't. She walked past me, picked up both cups, and carried them to the kitchen. Then I suppose I made 2 by accident. Her tone was calm, but her hand trembled slightly when she reached for the sink. In the afternoon, I drove into town telling her I needed to pick up some tools for the garage. But what I really needed was a moment of quiet, not her kind mine. I parked near the waterfront, watching the gray water lap at the pier. The logical part of my brain tried to assemble what I'd seen into something rational. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she talked to herself to fill the silence. Maybe the second cup was just muscle memory, a habit from the years when Grace was still home. But logic had holes, and fears slipped through them easily. When I returned, Mara was in the garden trimming the rose bushes. She looked serene, almost too serene, her face soft in the dying light. Did you find what you needed? She asked. Not yet, I said, and I wasn't talking about tools. That evening, as we ate dinner, I studied her every move, the way she chewed, the way she avoided my eyes when I asked how her lessons went. Fine, she said. You should visit sometime. The children adore me. I smiled thinly. Do they know about your midnight conversations? Her fork stopped midway. For an instant, her mask cracked. Then she laughed. You really are imaginative. Maybe you should start writing novels instead of fixing things. I didn't respond. Her laughter sounded wrong, rehearsed. When night came, I decided to test her. I pretended to fall asleep, counting the seconds between her breaths. At 11:46, the mattress shifted. She slipped out of bed quiet as smoke. This time, I didn't follow her downstairs. Instead, I sat up and stared at the window, my reflection faint in the glass. Behind me, the dark room stretched long and hollow. I stayed like that for an hour, listening. The sounds came again, the faint scrape of a chair, a murmur, a stifled laugh that didn't belong to her. I felt something ancient and heavy press against my chest. Not fear, but certainty. Something was wrong in that room, in that house, in her. The next morning, I confronted her as she poured coffee. Who are you talking to at night, Mara? She froze for a moment, then turned with a smile. You really won't let this go, will you? I just want to know. She set the coffee pot down. The smell of burnt beans filled the kitchen. Sometimes I talk to your memory, she said finally. The part of you that isn't here anymore. The words made no sense yet. They landed with weight. I'm right here. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes soft with something like pity, maybe. That night I couldn't rest. Her words replayed in my head, the part of you that isn't here anymore. What did she mean? I pulled out a notebook from my drawer, the same one I used years ago for design sketches, and started writing down everything. Dates, times, sounds, words. A man's voice, 2 teacups, burnt coffee, shadows. By the time the clock struck midnight, I had a page full of fragments and a growing sense that the truth was hiding in plain sight. The next day, I ran into my neighbor Frank while getting the mail. He was a retired cop, gruff but sharp. We chatted about the weather before he asked, "Everything okay, Elliot? You look like you haven't slept in days." I hesitated, then said, Frank, if you thought someone was hiding something in your house, what would you do? He raised an eyebrow. Depends. Hiding what, money or secrets? Secrets. He chuckled. Then I'd install a camera. Cameras don't lie. The idea hit me like a current. In your own house, I asked. He shrugged. If it's the only way to sleep again, why not? That evening, Mara made stew and hummed while she cooked, her voice calm, her movements measured. She asked me to pass the salt, told me about a student's recital, laughed at something that wasn't funny. It was a perfectly normal dinner. And that terrified me more than anything else. When she finally went to bed, I stayed at the table staring at the empty bowl. My reflection swirled faintly in the dark soup. I thought about Frank's advice, about proof, about the second voice that sounded so much like mine. I stood, opened my notebook, and wrote at the bottom of the page, something's not right. She's not alone even when she is. The pen lingered over the next line. Then I wrote, tomorrow I'll stop guessing. I'll start watching. Upstairs, the house creaked as if exhaling. I turned off the lights and stared into the dark, already knowing that once I started looking, there would be no way back. I woke up before dawn, the air in the room heavy and still. Mara slept soundly beside me, her face turned toward the window where the faintest blue of morning pressed through the curtains. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it, all the voices, the second cup, the whispers in the dark. But the thought didn't hold. The quiet between us wasn't peace anymore. It was the kind of silence that hides something. I watched her breathe slow and even. I thought of what she said the night before, that she talked to the part of me that wasn't here anymore. What part? My memory, my ghost, my absence. The question sat like a stone in my chest. When she stirred, I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep. She leaned over, kissed my forehead softly, and whispered, "I'll be back before noon. I have lessons today." After she left, I showered, dressed, and drove into town. The streets were still wet from last night's rain puddles reflecting the gray clouds like broken mirrors. I parked outside an electronics shop near the old theater. Inside, the store smelled of dust and metal, faintly warmed by the hum of the lights. A young man behind the counter greeted me. "Morning, sir. What can I help you with?" "I need a camera," I said. "What kind of camera?" "A small one. Something discreet." He looked curious. "Home security?" I hesitated. "Yes, home security." He nodded knowingly, the way people do when they think they understand more than you tell them. "I've got a few options for you. Wi-Fi-enabled night vision motion detection. You can access the footage from your phone." I followed him down an aisle lined with screens and boxed equipment. The glow of the display cameras flickered over our faces. I picked one up, small, black, unremarkable. "Does it record sound?" "It does. You can set it up in under 10 minutes. It's practically invisible once placed." "Perfect." I said, my voice lower than I intended. He smiled politely. "We get a lot of people coming in for this kind of thing. Keeps the peace of mind. You know peace of mind." The phrase hit oddly. I signed the receipt, thanked him, and left with a small paper bag that felt heavier than it should. Driving home, I rehearsed excuses in my head. If she found out, if she asked, what would I say? That I didn't trust her? That I was losing my mind? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. When I arrived, Mara's car was still gone. I went straight to the living room. The morning light came through the curtains, soft and dusty, showing every particle of air. I walked slowly, studying the space like a stranger. The room looked harmless, our photos, the piano, the old lamp. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all a stage set for something else. I found the perfect spot on the bookshelf between a carved wooden owl and a framed picture from Grace's graduation. The angle covered the entire room, the couch, the piano, the chair where Mara sat at night. My hands trembled slightly as I unpacked the camera. It was so small it looked like a button. I followed the instructions on the box, pairing it with my phone. The image appeared instantly, the living room from my own perspective, a mirror of reality, but flatter, colder. I adjusted the focus until the picture was clear. The camera caught the small imperfections, the crack in the wall near the fireplace, the faint reflection in the piano lid. For a moment I felt absurd, a man spying on his own home, his own wife. But another voice in me whispered that this wasn't about mistrust. It was about proof. Proof that I wasn't imagining everything. Proof that the house itself wasn't lying to me. The test recording worked. I could see myself moving around the grainy image, almost ghost-like. I deleted the clip, hid the lens behind the owl, and stepped back. Perfect. I barely had time to clean up before I heard the garage door open. Mara came in humming, carrying groceries. "You're home early," she said, smiling. "I thought you had errands." "I got them done quickly." I lied, my pulse quickening. She set the bags on the counter. "You should take a break, Elliot. You look exhausted." "I'm fine." Her eyes flicked toward me, soft but sharp, as if she could read the tension behind the words. Then she shrugged and began unpacking vegetables. "Dinner tonight, I'm thinking roast chicken." "That's fine," I said. The rest of the day passed like a slow shadow. I fixed the fence outside, half pretending to work, half checking my phone every hour. The app connected smoothly. I could see the living room, live, perfectly still. Every time Mara walked through the frame, I looked for something, a glance, a gesture, a secret, but she was just Mara, calm and deliberate. When evening came, we ate quietly. She told me about a new student, a shy boy who played Chopin with too much force. "He reminds me of you," she said, laughing softly. "How so?" "He doesn't know how strong he is until he breaks something." Her tone was light, but her eyes weren't. Later that night, I went upstairs while she read in the living room. I could hear the faint turning of pages, the creak of the chair. My phone rested beside the bed, showing the live feed from the camera. I watched as she set down her book, glanced toward the staircase toward me, and smiled faintly, as if she knew. She switched off the lamp and disappeared into the dark. For a few seconds, the room stayed still. Then movement. The faint shape of her robe brushed through the dim light. She walked to the piano and sat. Her head tilted slightly, listening to something. Then she began to speak. I turned up the volume on my phone. "You don't need to be afraid," she whispered. "He still doesn't remember." A low murmur followed, indecipherable but distinctly masculine. I sat frozen. The video trembled slightly, the image adjusting to the motion. Mara nodded slowly, as if answering someone unseen. "I know, but it's getting harder to keep him from knowing." My throat went dry. I watched her hands moving in small circles, touching the air like tracing invisible outlines. Then she turned her head, eyes fixed on something beyond the camera's range. "Do you still love him?" the man's voice asked, faint, distorted, but real. She smiled sadly. "I never stopped." I almost dropped the phone. The sound cut off, leaving only static. The image froze on her face, calm and luminous in the half-light. Then the feed went black. I sat there for a long time, listening to my own breathing, waiting for her to come upstairs. When she finally did, I pretended to sleep, my heart beat so loud I was sure she could hear it. She slid under the blanket, her skin cold against mine. "Long day," she murmured. "Yes," I said, eyes closed. She turned away, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Every rational explanation fell apart. How could there be another voice, my voice? When I was sure she was asleep, I took my phone again, replayed the video. The app said, "No data available." The clip was gone. Deleted. My hands shook. I tried again, refreshing the feed, but it only showed a message, "Connection lost." The room seemed to close in around me, the air thick with the smell of her perfume. She breathed softly beside me, steady, peaceful. I whispered into the dark, not knowing if I was speaking to her, to myself, or to something that now lived between us. "If you're hiding something," I said quietly, "I'll find it." Her body stirred faintly, maybe in sleep, maybe not. Downstairs, the floor creaked once, as if something moved on its own. I stared into the darkness until the outlines of the room blurred and the glow of the phone dimmed to nothing. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would know for sure. The morning came gray and heavy. I didn't move for a long time. The bed beside me was cold. I could hear the faint clatter of dishes downstairs and the sound of Mara humming, her voice low, almost mechanical. My phone rested on the nightstand screen, dark, the app still frozen with the words, "Connection lost." I sat up slowly. My reflection in the mirror looked pale older. My hands shook when I reached for the phone again. I opened the app. 2 new notifications blinked. Recording saved, 00:43 a.m. and recording saved, 01:27 a.m. My breath caught in my throat. I hesitated, then pressed play on the first one. The footage opened with a faint hum. The camera's angle was steady, the same room, the same lamplight shadows stretched long across the floor. After a few seconds, Mara walked into view wearing her ivory nightgown, her hair down over her shoulders. She moved with a calm, deliberate rhythm, like a performer on a stage. She sat on the sofa, folded her hands in her lap, and looked straight ahead, not at the camera, but beyond it. "You came back," she whispered. My heart stopped. There was no one in the frame but her. Still, she nodded as if answering a question. A pause, then her lips parted again. "He doesn't remember you," she said softly. "He's different now." A faint, low voice followed, muffled, distant, but unmistakably male. My stomach twisted. The voice sounded like mine. I froze, replaying the few seconds again. The voice was faint, distorted by static, but the cadence, the deep rhythm of it, was my own. She smiled faintly. "Yes, I know. I've tried to keep him from remembering." I paused the video, my chest tightening. The room on the screen felt colder than the one I sat in. I dragged the timeline forward. In the next minute, she leaned closer to the edge of the couch, whispering something I couldn't make out. Then she laughed, a quiet, sad sound. I shut off the video, afraid of what else I might hear. Downstairs, I heard her humming the same melody I'd heard on the recording. I waited until she left for her piano lessons before opening the second clip. My thumb hovered over the play button for a full minute. When it began, the timestamp read 1:27 a.m. The room looked darker, as if the light had dimmed on its own. Mara was there again, seated in the same spot, her hands trembling now. "He's fading faster every year," she murmured. "I can't lose both of you." Her voice cracked on the last words. I felt my throat tighten. I leaned forward, watching every detail, the way she pressed her palms together, the glint of tears in her eyes. Then something flickered near the piano. I paused the footage and zoomed in. In the glossy black reflection of the piano lid, there was a shape, a man's silhouette standing a few feet away from her. The shape's outline was clear enough to make out broad shoulders, the tilt of a head. And if I stared long enough, I could see a faint reflection of the face. It looked like mine. My mouth went dry. I scrubbed backward, then forward again. The figure was there for 3 seconds, maybe 4. I let the video play until the end. Mara stood, walked to the piano, and whispered something too quiet to hear. Then the feed cut out. I closed the app and stared at my hands. My pulse thundered in my ears. When I looked up, I caught my reflection in the dark TV screen, the same shape, the same posture as the shadow in the footage. For a moment, I thought I saw movement behind me, but when I turned, there was only the stillness of the room. I spent the rest of the morning trying to rationalize it. Faulty camera sound interference. But the voice. That voice was mine. By afternoon, Mara returned. She was cheerful, almost radiant. "You look tired," she said. "Didn't you sleep?" "Not really." "You should take a nap. You've been overthinking again." "Maybe I am," I said. She smiled. "Good. At least you know it." That night, I couldn't stop watching the feed. Every hour, I checked the app, waiting for movement. At 11:40, the camera light blinked, a soft red dot, alive again. Mara was still reading downstairs. I heard her chair creak, her footsteps crossing the floor. She turned off the lamp. I waited. The image flickered. The living room empty. Then the faint sound of a door closing somewhere, followed by a figure entering the frame. Mara. She moved slowly, her expression calm, serene. She sat in her usual place, lit a single candle, and stared into it for a long time. The camera adjusted, its focus tightening. Then the darkness beside her shifted. At first it looked like smoke, a shimmer in the air bending the light. Then gradually, a form began to take shape. Shoulders, a face, a man sitting across from her. My fingers tightened around the phone. He looked just like me. Mara reached out her hand, trembling, and touched his. "You remember this house, don't you?" The man nodded. His voice, when it came, was calm and eerily familiar. "I never left." She smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "He's starting to remember." The camera jerked suddenly, the picture blurring. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run downstairs to break the illusion, but fear held me frozen. Then, the man my mirror turned his head slightly. The camera caught the full outline of his face. It was me. Younger, sharper eyes filled with something I couldn't name anger or sorrow. Maybe both. I heard myself whisper aloud, "That's impossible." In the video, Mara leaned closer to him. "You have to let him go," she whispered. "He'll see you soon." The man smiled faintly, a cruel echo of my own. "He already does." Suddenly, the image glitched. The frame shook. Mara turned toward the camera, as if hearing something, her eyes locking onto the lens. For a second, I thought she was looking directly at me through the screen. Then, the feed went dark. I ran downstairs, heart hammering the floor cold beneath my feet. The living room was empty. The candle still burned faintly, its flame small and trembling. I looked around the couch, the piano, the corners, nothing. I picked up the candle holder, still warm, and whispered, "Who are you?" The air felt heavy, as though the house itself were holding its breath. Behind me, the floor creaked. I spun around. The shadows stretched long across the walls, and for a split second I swore I saw movement, a flicker of something pulling back into the dark. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, opened the app. The live feed was still running. The image on the screen showed me standing in the middle of the room, holding the candle. But there was something else. A second figure stood behind me, visible only through the camera's eye, tall, still face hidden in shadow. I turned around fast. Nothing there. On the screen, the figure moved closer until it was right behind me. And then, for the first time, it lifted its head. My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. The feed cut out. The candle flickered violently and went out, leaving me in complete darkness. From somewhere upstairs, Mara's voice drifted down. "Elliot? Why are you awake?" I didn't answer. The only sound was my own heartbeat, loud and uneven, filling the room, that no longer felt like my own. The sunlight was too bright that morning. It cut through the curtains and spilled over the bed, slicing across my eyes like a blade. I turned my face away, but the light found me anyway. Mara wasn't there. Her side of the bed was perfectly made, as if she hadn't slept in it at all. I sat up, the weight of the night pressing down on me. The phone lay on the nightstand, the screen dark. I reached for it with shaking hands and opened the camera app. It was empty. No videos, no saved files. The recordings I'd watched gone. I scrolled frantically. The app blinked once and shut itself down. I tried again. A pop-up appeared. Account suspended for suspicious activity. My stomach dropped. Downstairs, I heard her humming again, the same soft tune, the same rhythm I'd heard every night in the footage. I walked down quietly, my bare feet barely making a sound on the floorboards. She was standing by the sink, washing dishes, her hair tied loosely behind her neck. When she turned, her smile was effortless. "Good morning," she said. "Morning." "Coffee," I nodded. She poured me a cup, the steam curling in the air. "You should sleep more," she said. "You look haunted." "I didn't sleep well," I replied. "I was watching something." Her hand paused mid-air. "Watching what? The cameras?" I said, my voice low. Or at least I was. They're gone now. She tilted her head, her tone light. "Cameras? What cameras?" "The one I installed," I said slowly, studying her expression. "In the living room." She set down the cup and smiled, but her eyes didn't move. "Elliot," she said softly, "you really need to stop doing this to yourself. You're starting to sound unwell." "I'm not unwell." She stepped closer. "Then why are you shaking?" I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. She touched my wrist gently, her fingers cool. "You're seeing patterns where there aren't any. Hearing things in the dark. I've seen this before." "Before?" Her lips curved slightly. "You used to talk in your sleep, you know. Whole conversations. Maybe that's what you've been hearing?" That's not possible. Everything is possible when you start losing sleep. She smiled faintly and walked away. You should rest. You have such a good mind, Elliot. Don't let it turn against you. Her words lingered long after she left the room. Later that day, while she was teaching, I searched the house for the backup memory card I'd hidden in the garage. It was gone. The box I'd kept it in was still there, but empty. Someone had found it. By nightfall, the sky turned to a dull metallic gray. I sat in the car in our driveway, gripping the steering wheel, until my knuckles ached. The rational part of me whispered that there had to be an explanation. Maybe she'd discovered the camera and deleted everything. But another part of me, the part that had heard my own voice in those recordings, knew it was more than that. I needed answers. The next morning, I bought another camera, smaller, cheaper, easy to hide. I placed it behind the old grandfather clock in the hallway facing the living room. This time, I didn't tell myself it was for security. It was for truth. When I tested the feed, the image appeared on my phone. Static, flickered, then steadied. The room was empty, silent. I exhaled. And then from the speaker, a voice whispered, distorted low, almost mocking. "Why are you watching me, Elliot?" I froze. My thumb slipped and the phone fell from my hand. The voice was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of the app. I stared at the clock. Nothing. The house was still. That evening, Mara cooked dinner, stew and bread, the smell filling every corner of the house. She set the table for two and smiled when I walked in. "You're quiet tonight," she said. "Just tired." Her eyes lingered on mine. "You've been tired a lot lately." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "Do you trust me?" The question hit like a punch. "Of course," I said too quickly. "Good," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Because I'd never hurt you. Not after everything we've survived." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But behind her eyes there was something unreadable, something that didn't belong to the woman I'd married. When she went to bed, I stayed downstairs, staring at the darkened clock. The tiny red light blinked faintly. I opened the app. The camera was online. I hit record. The feed was grainy, but clear enough to see the room in shades of gray. For almost an hour, nothing happened. Then just after midnight, Mara's voice carried down the hall. "You shouldn't stay up so late," she said from the top of the stairs. I looked toward the staircase. It was empty. On the phone screen, though, she was standing in the living room, staring straight at the camera. My heart stopped. She whispered something I couldn't hear. The audio crackled. Then softly, my voice responded. "You shouldn't have deleted the files." I shut off the app and ran to the living room, flicking the lights on. Empty. The clock ticked. The chair was in place. No one there. When I turned back toward the hallway, Mara was standing at the top of the stairs, her robe draped around her like a shadow. "Why were you in here?" she asked. "I heard something." "Did you?" Her tone was soft, curious. "You've been hearing a lot of things lately?" "I'm not imagining it, Mara." She smiled gently, but her voice dropped lower. "You really don't remember, do you?" "Remember what?" She didn't answer. She just looked at me with that same pity she'd shown before and whispered, "Go to sleep, Elliot. You'll feel better in the morning." When she turned away, I saw something move behind her, a flicker, a darker shape that followed her shadow as she climbed the stairs. I stayed in the living room, too afraid to move, staring at the clock until dawn. The next day, I went through the footage from the night before. Nothing. No voices, no shadows, no sign of her. The video began at 10:30 p.m. and ended at 11:59. After that, the file cut off abruptly as if someone had stopped it. Later, while she was out, I searched her desk. Between stacks of piano sheet music, I found a thin envelope labeled medical records. Inside was a photocopy of a heart surgery form, date 1999. Patient A. Carter. I stared at it for a long time. The name was familiar, too familiar. Aaron Carter, my brother. The edges of memory scraped at the back of my mind. When I looked up, I caught my reflection in the window. Pale, hollow-eyed, the faintest trace of someone else behind my shoulder. That night, Mara said she was going for a walk. I waited 5 minutes after the door closed before following her outside. The rain had started again, cold and fine, coating the street in silver. I followed her around the side of the house, staying in the shadows. Through the living room window, I saw her silhouette and another beside her. 2 people standing close, facing each other. I moved closer, heart-hammering. The man turned slightly, his face catching the faint light from the lamp. It was me or something that looked exactly like me, younger, stronger, alive, in a way I no longer was. Mara's voice drifted through the glass. He's starting to see. The other man smiled. Then it's time. My breath fogged the window. I stumbled backward, knocking against the fence. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Inside, the lamp flickered. Mara looked toward the window, and the room was suddenly empty. I ran inside, calling her name, my voice shaking. No answer. When she appeared from the kitchen a minute later, she looked calm, almost serene. Why were you outside, Elliot? Who was in here? Her eyes softened. No one, she said. You're seeing things again. She stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face. You have to stop fighting it. It's hurting you. I wanted to scream, but no words came. Behind her, the mirror caught our reflection, and the man standing beside her was not me. I stared at that image until my vision blurred, until I could no longer tell which of us was real. In that moment, I understood one thing clearly. Whatever truth I was chasing, it wasn't outside me anymore. It was inside, buried deep, waiting to be found. I woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the window, steady and endless. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the hallway, the creak of the roof in the wind, but nothing else. Mara wasn't in bed. Her pillow was cold. I got up slowly, feeling the weight of exhaustion pull on my body. The night before played on a loop in my head, her voice the second figure, the reflection that wasn't mine. I went downstairs, every step heavier than the last. The living room was empty. The piano lid was open. A candle sat half melted beside it, wax dried into pale streaks down the side of the glass. The faint scent of smoke lingered. I sat down on the couch and tried to piece together what was real. My phone showed no new recordings. The backup files were gone. Every trace of what I'd seen had been wiped clean again, like someone was rewriting my life every night while I slept. When Mara returned, she was wearing her raincoat, droplets clinging to her hair. She looked fresh, composed, as if nothing had happened. "Good morning," she said. "Where were you?" "Walking. The rain clears my mind." I looked at her. "You didn't sleep again?" She smiled faintly. "You talk in your sleep? Did you know that last night you called a name?" "What name?" She tilted her head. "Aaron." The name hung in the air between us like static. I swallowed hard. "I don't remember that." "Of course you don't," she said softly, setting her umbrella by the door. "You never do." The rest of the day passed in a haze. Every sound in the house felt too deliberate, every silence too long. I worked in the garage, pretending to fix the shelves, but my hands shook too much to hold the tools. I kept hearing echoes, faint whispers, laughter that stopped when I turned around. In the afternoon, I found an old photo album in the basement. Dust covered the cover, but the edges were familiar, something from before everything went wrong. I opened it on the workbench. There we were, Mara and me at the beach race as a child, holding my hand. Then, on the next page, another picture. It was me and another man, almost identical. Same eyes, same mouth, same crooked smile. The caption, written in Mara's handwriting, read, "Elliot and Aaron, Summer, 1995. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I remembered flashes, two boys running through a field, one shouting to the other, a plane, a noise, smoke, then nothing. When Mara came down to the garage, she stopped when she saw the album open on the table. Her face drained of color. "Where did you find that?" "Here," I said. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" She sighed, looking tired. "You already know." "I don't," I said. "All I have are fragments. You need to tell me the truth." She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "He was your brother. You both worked on the same project. You both wanted to fly the test plane that day." I could hear the rain hammering on the roof. "Something went wrong," she continued. "The engines failed. They said there was only time to save one." "Who?" I whispered. She met my eyes, and for the first time there was fear in hers. "You. They saved you, Elliot. But when you woke up, you weren't the same." Her voice cracked slightly. "Sometimes you'd look at me and I'd see him. Sometimes you'd speak with his words. At first I thought it was grief. Then I realized maybe something of him stayed." I felt the room tilt, my breath short. "You're saying I don't know what you are anymore," she said. "But I know I lost both of you that day." I turned away, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. The photographs blurred. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you stopped asking," she said softly. And I thought if I pretended long enough, maybe we could live with the lie. That night I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the house seemed to move. Every whisper of wind sounded like someone breathing. At midnight, I sat at my desk with the photo album open beside me. I looked at the faces, mine and his, and the question burned through me. What if she was right? What if I wasn't the one who survived? I found an old box of papers in the attic stuffed with medical forms and letters. My name was on the hospital record, E. Carter. But the rest of the form was blurred with water stains. I flipped through page after page until I found one labeled Organ Transplant Release Form. The patient's name began with an A. Aaron Carter. The date matched the crash. My hands went numb. The attic light flickered. Then I heard it, the faintest echo of piano keys from below a slow, deliberate melody. I followed the sound down the stairs, heart pounding. Mara was sitting at the piano in her nightgown, her back to me, playing a tune I didn't recognize. "Mara," I said quietly. She didn't stop. "Do you remember this song?" I shook my head. "No." She kept playing soft and steady. "He used to play this when you were children. You'd argue over the melody. He'd always win." The words sent a chill through me. I stepped closer. "Mara, who are you talking to?" She looked up at the dark window above the piano. "Both of you." I turned toward the glass, and for a moment I saw it, a reflection that wasn't mine. Another face. Same eyes, same jaw, but colder. The piano stopped. When I looked back, Mara was crying silently. "Please stop fighting," she whispered. "I can't lose you again." The reflection in the window moved, even though I hadn't. It leaned closer, smiling faintly. I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. The sound broke the moment. Mara stood quickly, her voice shaking. "Elliot." But I was already running. I slammed the door to my study shut and pressed my back against it, breathing hard. On my desk, the photo album still lay open, the picture of Aaron staring back at me like a mirror I couldn't escape. When I looked up, my reflection in the dark computer screen smiled before I did. I grabbed the laptop and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the floor, the screen blinking once before going black. Then I heard a whisper from somewhere behind me, the same deep voice that had haunted the recordings. "You shouldn't have looked, brother." I froze. The word brother echoed in my head. "Who are you?" I shouted. The whisper came again closer, this time almost inside my ear. "I'm the part you buried." The light flickered once more, and for an instant I saw his shape reflected in the glass door, the same man from the footage standing behind me. I turned, but the room was empty. Only the sound of rain. I sank to the floor, my breath shaking. Somewhere in the dark, the piano began to play again. The same melody, soft, steady, endless. And then Mara's voice floated through the house, fragile and breaking. "He's awake again." The air grew colder. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I wasn't sure which one of us was listening. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It fell in a constant whispering curtain over Portland, turning the streets into silver veins and the air into a kind of fog you could taste. I hadn't been to work since that night in the study. My phone sat on the table buzzing with missed calls I couldn't answer. Mara moved around the house like a shadow, cooking, humming, pretending. But something between us had cracked completely. Every time I looked at her, I saw the reflection from that window, the man who wore my face, the ghost she seemed to know better than me. That morning I woke with a start, a dream still clinging to me. In the dream, I was in a hospital bed. A nurse leaned over me, her voice echoing. "You're lucky," she said. The transplant was a success. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then she added, "You're not who you think you are," and the monitor beside me went flat. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting upright in bed, heart pounding. Mara was standing in the doorway. "You called out in your sleep," she said. "You said his name again." I swung my legs off the bed. "We need to talk." Her voice was calm. "Then talk." I looked at her, the woman I'd shared a life with for over 20 years, and suddenly I didn't recognize her at all. "I need to know what really happened after the crash." "You already know what you're supposed to know." "That's not an answer." She sighed, tired. "Then stop asking questions you can't handle." I stared at her, something hot burning behind my ribs. "What are you so afraid I'll find?" Her eyes flicked toward the window, and her tone dropped into something almost tender. "The truth won't set you free, Elliot. It never does. It only ruins what's left." I left the room before I said something I couldn't take back. By noon, I was on the highway, driving through the endless gray rain toward the city. I needed answers, not her versions, not the fragments. Facts. The building where I'd once worked still stood near the old airfield, though it had changed owners years ago. I parked outside and walked in, soaked to the bone. The front desk was empty except for a man in his 60s wearing a faded engineer's badge. "Tom Hensley," he said when I introduced myself. His eyes narrowed with recognition. "Elliot Carter. Haven't seen that name in a long time." I hesitated. "You remember me? Course I do. You and your brother practically lived in that hangar." His smile faltered. "Sorry about what happened." "Tragic thing. Tom," I said, leaning in, "I need you to tell me what you remember about the crash." He blinked, uncertain. "After all these years, yes. Please." He looked away, lowering his voice. "We had a file, but it was sealed. Company orders. I remember there were 2 pilots scheduled for the test. Aaron and, well, you. I know that part." Tom scratched his head. "They pulled one of you from the wreck, only one. Nobody ever told us which. Next week, a woman came in, signed the medical release forms, collected the personal effects. I felt my stomach twist. A woman. "Your wife," he said simply. I closed my eyes. She told the company she wanted everything sealed, said she didn't want the press turning it into a circus. "Do you still have the files?" He shook his head. They were sent to Harborview Mental Institute. Something about psychological trauma and post-recovery therapy. I left before he could ask more. The name burned in my mind, Harborview. By dusk, I was standing at the gates of a gray concrete building overlooking the water. The sign read, Harborview Rehabilitation and Research Center. I told the receptionist I was looking for archived medical files from 1999. She asked for a name. Elliot Carter, I said. Then, after a pause, or Aaron. Her eyebrows rose, but she typed something into her computer. We do have a record from that year, but the files are sealed under legal guardianship by a Mrs. Mara Carter. Of course they were. Can I see them? She shook her head. Not without her authorization. I tried to smile. She passed away, I lied. The woman hesitated, then disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she handed me a small folder yellowed with age. I can only give you 10 minutes, she said. I nodded, my pulse racing. Inside the folder were a few faded documents, lab results, transfer authorizations, and a single photograph clipped to the front page. The photo showed a man lying in a hospital bed, tubes attached to his chest. His face was wrapped in gauze, but I could see the shape of his jaw. The tag at the bottom of the photo read, Patient A. Carter. I turned the page and froze. There was a line written in black ink, recipient of emergency cardiac graft. Donor E. Carter. My vision blurred. I read it again, slower this time. Donor E. Carter. I stumbled backward, gripping the wall. The paper trembled in my hands. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stuffed the documents back into the folder and rushed out of the building before anyone could stop me. The rain hit my face like needles, but I barely felt it. I got into the car and just sat there staring through the windshield as the wipers fought against the storm. If that report was true, then Aaron was the one who lived. I was the one who died. Or maybe we were both something in between, a man made from two halves that didn't belong together. The thought made me dizzy. I drove without thinking, the city blurring past in streaks of light. Every reflection on the glass felt like another face watching me. When I got home, the house was dark except for a single light burning in the living room. Mara sat by the piano, her face half in shadow. She looked up when I entered. You found it, didn't you? She said softly. I didn't answer. I tossed the folder onto the table. You signed these papers? She didn't even look. I did what I had to do. You chose who lived. Her lips trembled, but her eyes stayed calm. I chose who I could save. I stepped closer. Which one am I, Mara? She shook her head, tears glinting under the lamp. Does it matter? You're both. You've always been both. That's not an answer. It's the only one that makes sense. I slammed my hand against the piano, the keys clattering in protest. You played God. She flinched. I played a wife who lost everything I begged them to save you, but the body they pulled out wasn't whole. The only way to keep you alive was to give you his heart, his blood. Half of him, half of you. The words shattered whatever I had left of reason. I backed away, shaking my head. You should have let me die. She took a step toward me. You think death would have fixed anything? You both haunt me, one in the dark, one in the daylight. I can't tell which one loves me anymore. Her voice cracked, breaking into sobs. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was whisper. Then maybe neither of us does. Silence filled the room. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Finally, she wiped her tears and said in a voice barely above a whisper, You'll see him again. When you're ready. I didn't ask what she meant. I just turned away and left her there alone with the storm and the piano. Upstairs, I looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back pale and trembling. For a long time it didn't move. Then slowly it smiled. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. From downstairs I heard Mara call softly. "He's here, Elliot." He never left. The lights flickered once, and in the reflection, another face stood behind mine. Familiar patient waiting. "Aaron?" I whispered. "What do you want?" His answer came from inside me, not outside. To finish what she started. The mirror cracked. The wipers beat a steady rhythm against the windshield as I drove north through the dark. The rain was relentless, thick as static, swallowing the headlights, until all I could see was the endless empty road ahead. I hadn't told Mara I was leaving. I hadn't even packed. The only thing in the passenger seat was the folder from Harborview and the small leather-bound notebook I'd found in the attic, the one labeled Patient Notes. MC. I didn't know why I'd taken it. Maybe I just needed to hold on to something real. The highway stretched on forever, and somewhere between the streaks of rain and the hum of the tires, I started to hear things. My name whispered in the white noise, a heartbeat thudding in rhythm with the wipers, a voice that wasn't mine saying, "You should have stayed dead." By the time I reached Seattle, dawn had started bleeding into the horizon. The city was a dull silhouette against the mist. Harborview stood on a hill above the water, gray and severe, its windows reflecting the storm. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and paper. The walls were painted a color that might have once been white. I told the woman at the front desk that I was looking for old patient records research, I said. She didn't ask for details. She led me down a long corridor to an archive room. Most of these were transferred from the old wing, she said. "We're in the process of digitizing them, but you can take a look." I thanked her and waited until she left. The shelves were lined with boxes labeled by year. I found 1999 near the back, a thin layer of dust covering the lid. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were a few folders and a small leather journal nearly identical to the one in my car. The tag read, "MC Confidential." I flipped it open. The first page was written in Mara's handwriting. March 3rd, 1999. The doctors said one of them can be saved. They asked me to choose. I told them I couldn't. They told me I already had. My breath caught. I turned the page. March 4th. Elliot's body survived, but Aaron's heart was stronger. They said the surgery was a success. They said he would live. But when he opened his eyes, he didn't look at me the same way. I kept reading each line, pulling me deeper into her private madness. March 12th. He calls me by Aaron's name when he's half asleep. Sometimes he talks about things only Aaron knew. The doctors say it's just trauma, but I see it when he smiles. It's not just him anymore. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the heartbeat beneath. April 1st. I told him he was Elliot. I had to. The other truth would destroy him. Maybe it already has. The next entry was written in shaky handwriting, as if she'd been crying while she wrote. April 5th. I kept the stronger one, but I called him by the other's name. Maybe that's my punishment. Every night I hear them both whispering in my dreams. One angry, one lost. I closed the notebook, but the words burned in my mind. I sat there in the silence of the archive room, surrounded by boxes of forgotten lives, trying to decide which one of mine was real. When I stood to leave, I noticed another envelope at the bottom of the box. It was sealed, addressed in Mara's handwriting. To whoever remembers the truth. I tore it open. Inside was a single page folded neatly. If you're reading this, then you already know. I didn't choose who to save. I chose who I couldn't live without. The room tilted. I stumbled, catching myself on the shelf. The journal slipped from my hand and fell open on the floor. A small photograph slid out, a younger Mara standing between two men. Both were smiling. Both were me. I took the photo and the letter and left the building. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky hung low and gray, the world washed clean. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the photograph. The two versions of myself looked so alive, so certain. I couldn't remember being either of them. When I finally started the car, my hands were still trembling. I didn't know where to go, but my body seemed to decide for me. The road led me south, back toward home. By the time I pulled into the driveway, night had fallen. The house was dark except for a flicker of light in the living room. I stepped inside, quietly dripping water onto the floor. Mara was sitting by the piano again, a single candle burning beside her. The same melody drifted through the air, soft, haunting. "You found it, didn't you?" she said without turning around. I laid the journal on the table. "You lied to me for 25 years. I saved you. You created me," I said, my voice shaking. "You stitched me together from two men and a lie." She turned to look at me. Her eyes were wet, but her face was calm. "I kept what was left of you both. I thought if I loved you enough, maybe it would make you whole. You should have let one of us go." "I couldn't," she whispered. "Every night I saw you both in my dreams calling my name. I couldn't choose." I took a step closer. "Then you didn't save anyone. You cursed us both." She stood, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand, Elliot, Aaron, whoever you are. I loved you, both of you. I thought love could hold you together." Her voice broke, and for the first time I saw her not as the woman who'd lied to me, but as someone who'd tried to survive something impossible. "Whose heart is this?" I asked, pressing a hand to my chest. She didn't answer. She just looked at me with unbearable sadness. The candle flickered. For a moment her shadow split into two on the wall, one standing still, the other turning toward me. I stepped back, my pulse racing. "Mara." She looked behind me and whispered, "He's here." I turned, and there he was, standing in the doorway, soaked from the rain, his eyes dark and familiar. Aaron. Or maybe just the part of me that refused to stay buried. He smiled faintly. "You found her diary? So now you know." Mara covered her mouth, sobbing. "Please don't do this." Aaron's voice was calm. "It's already done." I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body locked as the air thickened, the room shrinking around us. He stepped closer until we were face to face. I could see my own reflection in his eyes. "You took my life," he said quietly. "Now I'm taking it back." Before I could speak, the candle blew out. The room plunged into darkness. Mara screamed. When I found the matches and lit the flame again, Aaron was gone. Only Mara stood there, trembling, her face pale in the candlelight. "What did you see?" she whispered. "I saw myself," I said. "And I don't know which one I am anymore." She took my hand, her fingers cold and shaking. "You're the one who stayed," she said. "That has to be enough." But it wasn't. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room with the candle burning low and opened her journal again. The last line stared back at me like a curse. I kept one of them, but I lost both. I closed the book and stared into the flame until it burned down to nothing. Somewhere behind me, in the reflection of the piano lid, another figure leaned forward and whispered, "Not yet." The storm returned that night, louder than before. Thunder rolled through the valley like something alive, shaking the windows, rattling the roof. I stood in the doorway of the living room, watching the lightning flash across Mara's face. She was sitting by the piano again, her hands trembling in her lap. The candle beside her flickered wildly, throwing her shadow against the wall. Two shapes that moved out of sync. "Mara," I said softly. She didn't look up. "He's coming," she whispered. "Who, you know who?" Her eyes lifted to the dark hallway behind me. For a moment I thought I saw movement there, a shimmer, a pulse of darkness, but when I turned, there was nothing. I stepped closer to her. "You need to tell me the truth now. All of it." Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but instead she laughed, a small, broken sound that carried no joy. "The truth," she said. "You think the truth will help you try me?" She stood slowly, the candlelight catching the tears that glistened on her cheeks. "You both wanted to live, but only one body could be saved. Do you remember what the surgeon told me I didn't answer? He said one heart was strong enough to keep the other alive." Lightning flared, filling the room with white light. For a heartbeat, I saw the faint reflection in the window. Someone standing behind me. Then it was gone. Mara's voice grew softer. "The night after the surgery, I sat beside your bed. You were breathing, but when I looked at you, I saw both of you. Your eyes opened, and I swear to God, I didn't know which one I was talking to. I moved toward her, but she stepped back. 'Don't,' she said sharply. 'You look like him when you're angry.' Mara, stop." She covered her ears, shaking her head. "You both sound the same. You both want to be real, but only one can stay." Thunder cracked so loud the lights flickered and died. The house plunged into darkness. Somewhere in the shadows, a voice that wasn't mine whispered, "She's right." I froze. "Aaron." The voice came again, closer now. "You stole everything from me." I turned toward the sound, my pulse hammering. The air felt thick, charged, heavy with static. "You're not real," I said. "You're a fragment, a memory." The voice laughed softly. "Then why do you hear me?" Lightning flashed again. And for a moment, he was there, standing across the room, soaked in shadow, his face half lit by the candle. My own face only colder. Mara gasped, backing toward the piano. "Please," she begged. "Don't make me choose again." He smiled. "You already did." I took a step forward, my voice low. "What do you want?" "To finish what she started," he said. "To take back my life." "She gave you your life," I shouted. "She gave us both a chance. She gave you mine." His voice thundered louder than the storm. "You've been living inside my body, breathing with my heart, pretending to be me." "That's not true." Mara's voice cut through the noise. "Stop it, both of you." She moved between us, her arms outstretched as if she could hold two ghosts apart. "I tried to save you both," she cried. "I thought I could love you enough to make you one again." The wind howled through the cracks in the windows. The flame on the candle went out. For a moment there was nothing but darkness. Then from somewhere deep inside I heard a faint rhythmic sound. A heartbeat. But it wasn't mine. The air shimmered. When my eyes adjusted, he was closer, his face inches from mine. I could see the outline of a scar running down his chest, right where mine was. "You feel it, don't you?" he said. "Every beat belongs to me." I reached out, my hand trembling. "If I'm not real, then why do you need to convince me?" He tilted his head, a faint smile crossing his face. "Because you won't let me go." Before I could react, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was ice. The room spun around us, flashes of memory bursting like lightning. Mara crying over a hospital bed, a surgeon's bloody gloves, the sound of two heart monitors merging into one tone. "Let me live," he whispered. "I already am," I said, and shoved him backward. He hit the piano, and the keys erupted in a discordant crash that echoed through the house. Mara screamed. I stumbled, gasping, the room spinning. When I looked again, he was gone. Only the candle, somehow relit, burned on the floor. Mara fell to her knees, clutching her chest. "What have you done? I didn't..." "He was..." She looked up at me, her voice a whisper. "You're the one who never died, Elliot. He's just what you buried." I knelt beside her. "You saw him too?" She shook her head. "No. I saw you." The storm outside began to fade. The silence that followed was worse. I helped her to the couch. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes distant. "You need to rest," I said. "I can't rest," she murmured. "Every time I close my eyes, I see both of you. And every time you wake up, I don't know which one you'll be." I touched her hand. "Then tell me who you want me to be." She smiled weakly. "I just want the man I loved. The one who used to hum when he worked, who fixed the roof himself, who made me tea when I couldn't sleep." "I can be him," I said. She looked at me sadly. "He's gone, Elliot. Maybe he's been gone a long time." Lightning flashed one last time, bright enough to turn the world white. When it faded, the reflection in the window showed only her and me. No shadow behind us, no double. For a moment I thought it was over. Then faintly the piano began to play, a slow, haunting melody, the same one from my dreams. Mara looked toward it, her lips trembling. "Do you hear that?" "Yes," I whispered. The melody grew louder. The keys pressed down on their own, as if guided by invisible hands. The air hummed. The house itself seemed to breathe. Mara stood reaching for the piano. "He's still here." I grabbed her wrist. "Don't!" She pulled free and touched the keys. The sound stopped instantly. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. "He's not gone, Elliot. He's waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to decide which one of you lives." I didn't answer. I couldn't. She took my hand, pressing it against her chest. "One heart can't beat for two men. You have to choose." The clock in the hallway struck midnight. Each chime echoed like a heartbeat. Outside, the storm finally broke, leaving only silence. Mara's voice was barely audible. "You know what you have to do." I looked at her, then at the piano, then at the empty space reflected in the window. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted, a pull between two worlds, between who I was and who I wasn't. And then for the first time, I heard my own heartbeat clearly. Just one. When I looked up, she was gone. The room was empty except for the flickering candle and the faint scent of her perfume. On the piano, a single note played by itself, a soft, final sound that lingered in the air long after the silence returned. The morning came, pale and cold light creeping through the cracks in the curtains like a slow confession. I woke on the couch, fully dressed, my body stiff, my mind hollow. The house was silent. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stillness so deep it felt unnatural. The clock on the wall read 7:12. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and for a moment I forgot everything. The piano, the shadow, the voices. Then the memories rushed back like a flood. "Mara." I called softly. No answer. Her mug sat on the table, a half-finished cup of tea gone cold. A thin trail of steam rose from the candle stub, still burning beside it. I stood and walked down the hall toward the bedroom. The door was open. The bed was empty. The air smelled faintly of her perfume lavender and something metallic beneath it like blood on silver. I checked every room. Nothing. No note, no sound, no trace of where she'd gone. Outside, the world was washed clean. The street shimmered with puddles that reflected the gray sky. I stepped onto the porch and looked around, half expecting to see her walking up the road with her umbrella humming like she always did after the rain. But there was no one. When I came back inside, the phone was ringing. The sound startled me, sharp and unfamiliar after so much quiet. "Mr. Burr Carter," a woman's voice asked. "This is Dr. Heller from Portland General. We need you to come in." I froze. "Why? What happened? There's been an incident," she said. "Your wife was found downtown early this morning. She's stable, but we'd like you here as soon as possible." The hospital smelled of bleach and rain-soaked clothing. The nurse led me through a maze of white corridors to a small room at the end of the hall. Mara lay in the bed, her skin pale against the sheets. An IV ran into her arm. She was disoriented when they brought her in. The doctor said quietly, "She kept asking for you, and for someone named Aaron." My throat closed. "What happened to her?" "She was found near the river," he said. "No injuries, but she seemed confused, like she'd lost her sense of time." I nodded, though I didn't really hear him. I stepped to her bedside. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment she looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You came," she whispered. "Of course I came." Her gaze drifted past me to the window. "He said you wouldn't." I swallowed hard. "Who?" She smiled faintly, almost peacefully. "The one I couldn't let go of." I sat down beside her, taking her hand. It was cold. "Mara, you're safe now. It's over." She turned her face toward me, her lips trembling. "It's never over. You can't bury a heart and expect it not to beat." Her words cut through me like ice. The doctor reappeared, speaking softly from the doorway. "She'll need rest, Mr. Carter. I suggest you go home, get some sleep." I nodded, but I didn't leave. I sat there for hours, watching the rain slide down the window pane, tracing lines that never met. By evening, she was asleep again. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, then slipped out of the room. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove aimlessly until I found myself at the old airfield, the place where everything began. The hangar stood abandoned now, a skeleton of metal and rust. I parked outside and sat in the car, listening to the rain on the roof. The wind howled through the broken panels. Somewhere inside, something banged metal on metal, rhythmic, steady. I stepped out of the car and pushed open the door. The smell of oil and decay hit me. The sound was coming from the far corner. When I turned my flashlight that way, it caught a glint of something metallic. A plane wing. The wreckage. I walked closer, my boots echoing on the wet floor. The plane was barely more than a frame now, the metal corroded and bent. A faint smell of burned plastic lingered in the air. I reached out, running my fingers along the cold steel. Images flashed in my mind, the roar of engines, the blinding light, the sound of Mara screaming my name. I pulled my hand back and noticed something wedged beneath the cockpit seat, a small cassette tape, its label smeared, but still readable: Flight Debrief, March 1999. My pulse quickened. I stuffed it into my pocket and left. Back at the house, I dug out an old tape recorder from the garage. The power flickered once when I plugged it in, as though the house itself was holding its breath. The tape clicked into place. I pressed play. Static hissed, followed by muffled voices. Then a man spoke my voice. Or maybe his. "System check complete. Ready for takeoff." Another voice answered. "Aaron. Calm, steady. You always rush. One mistake and it's over." "Don't start," the first voice said. "We've tested this 100 times, not with both of us on board." Then Mara's voice came faintly through the comms, trembling. "Promise me you'll be careful." Silence. Then laughter, mine his both. The sound of engines roaring. The crackle of interference. Then a scream. The recording went dead. I sat there staring at the tape, my heart pounding. My mind replayed the moment: one plane, two men, one survivor, and a woman who had to choose. When I looked up, the reflection in the dark window wasn't mine. He stood behind me, pale, dripping eyes, black as the storm. "You shouldn't have come back here," he said. I turned slowly. "What are you?" "I'm what's left," he said. "You buried me so you could live. But you can't erase the half that remembers." "I didn't bury you," I said. "She did. She just gave you the lie," he said softly. "You kept it alive." He stepped closer. The air went cold. I could see the faint scar running down his chest, my scar reversed like a mirror image. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. "Nothing," he said. "You've already given me everything. Now you need to finish it." He handed me something, a small metal tag, the kind worn by pilots. It was bent, but the name was still legible. Aaron Carter. When I looked up again, he was gone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the tag in my hand. The weight of it was unbearable. The phone rang. I answered without thinking. A nurse's voice came through. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry, but your wife?" She stopped breathing about an hour ago. The room tilted. I dropped the tag. It hit the floor with a sound like a bell. I don't remember driving back to the hospital. I don't remember signing the forms. I just remember standing at the foot of her bed, staring at her face, peaceful and still. "She was calling your name," the nurse said gently. "She said you'd understand." I looked down at Mara, my voice barely a whisper. "I do." When I left the hospital, the rain had stopped again. The air was sharp clean. I drove to the bridge overlooking the river, the same one where she'd been found. The cassette tape was still in my pocket. I took it out and threw it into the water. It vanished without a sound. Then I pulled the metal tag from my jacket. Aaron Carter. I held it in my palm, feeling the edges cut into my skin. "You win?" I said quietly, and dropped it into the river too. The current caught it, carrying it away, until it disappeared beneath the surface. I stood there until the first light of dawn touched the water, my reflection rippling beside me, two faces for a moment, then one. For the first time in years, the silence felt like peace. The rain had stopped by the time I returned home, leaving the streets slick and shining like glass. The house stood in silence, the porch light flickering faintly against the fog. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, half expecting to hear her voice, to smell her perfume. But the air was still cold, empty. I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture, the picture frames, the piano keys she'd played the night before she died. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. Her cup still sat on the table. Her scarf hung from the back of the chair. It felt less like a home and more like a museum, every object a memory frozen in time. In the living room, the candle had burned itself out, leaving a small pool of hardened wax on the piano. I found the lighter beside it and flicked it on, watching the flame dance. The light cast my reflection in the darkened window. For a moment I thought I saw him standing there, again, my shadow, my brother. But it was only me this time. I sat down at the piano. My fingers hovered over the keys, but didn't press them. I wasn't sure which of us had learned to play first, or which of us she'd taught more patiently. I remembered her laughter echoing through this room, the sound of two voices arguing playfully over the melody, blending into something whole. I opened the lid of the piano bench and found what I was looking for. The small camera I had installed months ago, the one I'd forgotten in all the chaos. It was still there, untouched. I lifted it out, my hands trembling, and carried it to my desk. When I connected it to my laptop, the screen flickered to life. There were dozens of files, their timestamps stretching back weeks. My heart pounded as I opened the most recent one, the night before the accident, the night Mara had gone missing. The video began with static. Then slowly the room came into focus, the candle, the piano, Mara, sitting on the stool. She was talking to someone, her voice quiet, almost reverent. "You were both so beautiful once," she said. "Two halves of the same heart." The camera caught her reflection in the window. I expected to see myself there, or rather him. But the glass showed only her face, pale and tired eyes glistening with tears. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver tag with Aaron Carter etched into it. She turned it over in her hands. "I kept this because I didn't know how to let go. I thought if I held on long enough, maybe you'd come back." Her voice cracked. "But you both came back, didn't you? And neither of you ever left." I felt something tighten in my chest. I wanted to stop watching, but I couldn't. Mara stood and moved closer to the piano. "If you can hear me," she whispered, "I forgive you, both of you. But I can't live between ghosts anymore." Then she looked straight into the camera, straight into me. "Elliot," she said softly, "you have to tell the story. Tell it so someone knows we existed. Otherwise, none of it will matter." The screen went black. I sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the computer. Then, without thinking, I opened the recording app on my laptop. The red light blinked on, and I stared into it. "My name is Elliot Carter," I said, my voice rough from disuse. "Or maybe it's Aaron. Maybe it's both. This is the story of how two lives became one, and how love tried to hold them together." I paused, rubbing my eyes. You see, we think truth brings peace, but sometimes it just replaces one kind of pain with another. Mara believed love could rewrite death. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's what I am, the proof. I looked around the room, the piano, the photos, the candle. Everything had become a monument to what we'd been. When she died, I continued, it felt like the last piece of us went with her. But maybe she wasn't leaving. Maybe she was setting us free. The camera's red light blinked steadily, waiting. I reached for the small recorder on the desk and pressed play. Mara's voice filled the room again, this time from a therapy session I hadn't heard before, something I'd found on the drive from the hospital. "If I die," she was saying, "tell him he was both of them. That way, neither will ever be alone." I smiled through the tears I didn't realize were falling. "You were right, Mara," I whispered. "I'm not alone." The recording ended. I looked back at the laptop camera. I don't know if I'm Elliot or Aaron anymore. Maybe the difference stopped mattering the day she chose to save us. Maybe all that matters is that we loved her, and that somehow she loved both of us enough to keep us alive. I reached to turn off the recording, then hesitated. "If anyone finds this," I said quietly, "remember, family isn't built on blood or names. It's built on what we remember of each other, even when the truth is too heavy to carry." I saved the file and titled it, "The Truth Recorded." For a while, I just sat there listening to the rain start up again. The sound was softer this time, almost soothing. I uploaded the video to an anonymous channel and waited for the progress bar to reach the end. When the upload finished, I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The streetlights glowed against the fog halos of gold in the dark. Somewhere beyond the glass, the river moved quietly, carrying the fragments of our story downstream. I thought I saw him again just for a moment. Standing on the other side of the window, his face calm, almost peaceful. He nodded once, as if to say it was done. Then he was gone. I exhaled slowly, my breath fogging the glass. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel haunted. It just felt quiet. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the piano, the one Mara had loved more than anything. I pressed a single key. The note rang clear, steady, alive. Goodbye, Mara, I whispered. Thank you. Outside, dawn began to break, faint light bleeding through the clouds, washing the world in silver. I picked up my jacket, ready to leave the house behind. As I reached the door, the laptop chimed behind me, a soft notification sound. I turned. On the screen, the video I'd uploaded had already gained hundreds of views. A comment appeared beneath it. I don't know who you are, but I felt this. Thank you for telling the story. I smiled. Maybe that was what she'd wanted all along. For the story to outlive the pain. For someone somewhere to hear it and understand. I stepped outside into the cool morning air, locking the door behind me. The sun was rising soft and gold, turning the wet pavement into mirrors. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was walking toward it. And behind me, through the window, the reflection of two figures slowly faded into one. It had been a year since I last stepped into this town. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, the kind of scent that comes only after spring rain. I walked along the riverside trail with a cup of coffee in my hand, watching the first light spread across the water. The river looked different now, calmer, wider, like time itself had slowed down. Somewhere beneath that surface lay the things I had let go of, a name tag, a cassette tape, the weight of a past I could no longer carry. The house was gone. They tore it down last winter. In its place stood a new one, brighter, taller, built by someone who would never know the stories buried in its foundation. I didn't mind. Some ghosts deserved a rest. I live in a small apartment now, a few blocks from the airfield where everything began. I spend my mornings working on old plane engines for a restoration shop. The sound of tools and metal has become my new kind of silence, honest, steady grounding. Some afternoons I visit the community center downtown to help veterans and accident survivors talk through their trauma. I listen more than I speak. It feels right that way. Sometimes people recognize my voice from the video I uploaded months ago, the one titled "The Truth Recorded." I never meant for it to reach anyone, but somehow it did. Thousands of comments came in from strangers across the world. They spoke about loss, love, and forgiveness. Some said they saw themselves in my story. Others just thanked me for sharing it. Each message felt like a heartbeat. And in a strange way, I started to feel like both of us, Elliot and Aaron, were still alive, scattered among the people who listened. One afternoon, I drove back to the old neighborhood. I parked by the hill overlooking the river and walked the rest of the way. The willow tree was still there, its branches brushing the ground like a curtain. Beneath it, a small stone marked her resting place. Mara Carter, 1969 to 2024. Loved beyond measure. I placed a white lily on the soil and knelt beside it. I told our story, I said quietly. You were right. Someone listened. The wind rustled through the branches, gentle and soft, as if answering. For a long time, I just stayed there, watching the river move. I thought about the way Mara used to laugh when I'd hum while fixing things around the house. I thought about Aaron's steady hands on the controls of that plane, the confidence in his voice when he said he could handle it. And I thought about the man I had become, carrying both of them, finally learning how to live without letting either one control me. When I went back home that evening, I found myself sitting at my desk again the same way I had the night I first told our story. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of rain starting outside. I turned on the small camera, the red light blinking like a pulse. For a moment I just looked at it, unsure where to start. Then I smiled. My name is Elliot Carter, I said softly. Or maybe it's Aaron. I guess that doesn't matter anymore. I leaned forward slightly. If you've made it this far, if you've listened to my story, thank you. Maybe you've lost someone too. Maybe you've been haunted by something you couldn't name. If so, I hope you understand now that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without pain. The words came easier than I expected. I used to think identity was something fixed, like a name etched in metal. But now I know it's more like a river. It changes shape, it carries things away, and it always finds its way forward. I'm not just the man who survived the crash or the man who lost his wife. I'm the man who stayed. I paused, hearing the rain tap gently against the window. She believed love could hold two souls together. Maybe she was right. Maybe love isn't about choosing one person over another. It's about keeping the best parts alive, even after everything else is gone. I reached for the small wooden box on the table. Inside was Mara's wedding ring. I held it up to the camera for a moment before placing it back gently. I forgave her, and I hope wherever she is, she forgave me too. A faint smile crossed my face. If you're watching this and carrying your own ghosts, I want you to know it's okay to let them rest. They won't disappear. They'll just stop hurting so much. The light from the window caught the edge of the piano in the corner. I hadn't played it in a long time, but tonight felt right. I walked over and sat down. The keys were cool beneath my fingers. I began to play the melody Mara had loved, the same one that once filled our home with tension and longing. This time it sounded different, slower, peaceful, whole. As I played, I spoke softly, almost to myself. She told me to tell the story, so someone would know we existed. I think I finally did that. And if you're still here listening, maybe it means we weren't forgotten. The melody faded into silence. I looked back at the camera. If this story touched you, tell me where you're watching from. Leave a comment. Share your story too. Maybe it will help someone else the way this helped me. I smiled, genuine and quiet. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this about love loss and second chances, subscribe to the channel. Stay with me for a while. We're all just trying to find our way back home. I reached over and turned off the recording. The red light blinked once, then went dark. Outside, the rain stopped. I opened the window and let the fresh air in. The world smelled clean again, like something was beginning. Later, I uploaded the video and sat back watching the progress bar crawl toward completion. When it finished, I didn't refresh the page or check the views. It didn't matter this time. The story was no longer mine to keep. It belonged to whoever needed to hear it. I poured myself another cup of coffee and walked to the piano. My reflection glimmered faintly in the window, only one shape now, instead of two. "Good night, Mara," I whispered. "Good night, Aaron." The sun began to rise, soft gold spilling across the floorboards. I opened the door and stepped outside. The world was quiet, except for the faint rush of the river and the distant call of birds. For the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted. I felt whole. And as I walked away from the apartment, leaving the door open just long enough for the light to flood in, I knew the story wasn't ending. It was simply moving forward, carried by every person who would ever hear it, carried by every heart, still learning to forgive itself. Somewhere in the distance, the piano played its final note, gentle, steady, and free.